Beringia. For thousands of years, it has become a symbol of humanity's greatest journey, a land bridge connecting Asia to the Americas, where our ancestors crossed into a new world during the Ice Age. Although newer theories about coastal migrations have emerged in recent decades, Beringia has remained central to understanding how humans first reached the Americas. Yet while archaeologists have searched this ancient landscape for generations, recovering stone tools, animal bones, and traces of ancient camps, the actual human remains of those first travelers have remained almost impossibly rare. Most of Beringia now lies beneath the cold waters of the Bering Sea, its secret swallowed by rising oceans at the end of the Ice Age. However, a discovery in central Alaska would shatter everything we thought we knew. In the summer of 2013, archaeologists working at the Upward Sun River site in Alaska's remote Tanana River Valley, accessible only by helicopter, made a discovery both heartbreaking and scientifically revolutionary. Beneath layers of sand and silt, at the bottom of an ancient residential structure, they found what appeared to be a simple burial pit. But what lay inside would rewrite the story of the Americas. Two tiny skeletons, lying side by side in the darkness for 11,500 years. The local indigenous community would give them beautiful names. Zahiti Anin Tihidagai, Sunrise Child Girl, and Yukanin Tidagai, Dawn Twilight Child Girl. One infant, later designated USR1 by scientists, had survived only 6 to 12 weeks in the harsh Alaskan wilderness before death claimed her. The other, USR2, never drew a single breath. A late-term fetus at approximately 30 weeks of gestation who had been stillborn or died shortly after premature birth. Both were covered with a thick layer of red ochre, a mineral pigment that ancient peoples across the world used in burial ceremonies to honor the dead. The grief of these ancient parents was palpable, even across millennia. 4 decorated antler rods, 2 finely crafted lithic dart points, and additional stone tools accompanied the infants into eternity, weapons and implements that had once brought down the massive game animals that sustained these early peoples. Someone had carefully placed these precious items with the babies, perhaps hoping they would need them in another world. The burial pit had been dug directly beneath another hearth feature, one that contained something equally tragic: the cremated remains of a 3-year-old child, discovered in 2010, dating to the same brief period 11,500 years ago. 3 children, 3 different deaths, 3 different burials, yet all from the same moment in time. But here was the mystery that would haunt researchers. Why were the infants buried with grave goods intact, while the 3-year-old was cremated? What tragedy had befallen this ancient family? Together, these 3 children represent the only confirmed human remains from that period ever found in the vast region that was once Beringia. In all of that frozen landscape, thousands of square miles that once connected 2 continents, only 3 small bodies have survived to tell their story. The true revelation, however, would come not from the bones themselves, nor from the beautiful artifacts buried with them, but from something invisible to the naked eye: their DNA. A team from the University of Utah, led by anthropology professor Dennis O'Rourke, undertook the painstaking work of extracting and analyzing genetic material from the infants' fragile bones. They focused on mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material contained within the mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses of living cells that carry their own DNA. This type of DNA is passed only from mother to child without recombination, creating clear maternal lineages that can be traced back through the mists of time, like an unbroken thread connecting past to present. Despite the incredible age of the remains, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, the team succeeded in sequencing complete mitochondrial genomes from both infants. From USR1, they obtained 20,004 high-quality DNA sequences. From USR2, an astonishing 32,979 sequences. The cremated remains of the 3-year-old child could not be genetically analyzed. The intense heat of cremation had destroyed any DNA, leaving only questions behind. When the researchers analyzed the sequences from the 2 infants, they made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The 2 babies buried together, laid side by side with such obvious care, belonged to 2 completely different mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, major branches of the human genetic family tree. These children were not sisters. They were not even closely related through their mothers. USR1, who had lived for 6 to 12 weeks, carried the C1b lineage, a genetic signature found today among indigenous peoples from the Great Lakes and northeastern woodlands of North America, among the Ojibwe and Abenaki, and scattered across tribal communities throughout the Amazon basin in Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. USR2, the stillborn, carried the B2 lineage, Another distinctly Native American genetic marker that appears across indigenous populations from the Arctic of Alaska and northern Canada, through Mexico and Central America, and all the way into South America, down to Patagonia in the frozen southern tip of Chile. It's not common to find infants buried together that are not related maternally, O'Rourke said, his words heavy with implication. It raises questions about the social structure and mortuary practices of these early people. Were these babies cousins? Did they share a father even though their mothers came from different genetic lines? The burial suggested an intimacy, a connection that transcended simple biology. To understand the full significance of this discovery, we must examine the larger puzzle of Native American origins, a mystery that has consumed researchers for generations. Indigenous peoples of the Americas belong to 5 major mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, designated with simple letters that belie their complexity: A, B, C, D, and X. The presence of 5 haplogroups had raised an obvious and troubling question for decades. Did this diversity result from multiple waves of migration from Asia at different times, with each wave bringing a different haplogroup like ships arriving at different ports? Or could there be another explanation? Some researchers had proposed an alternative hypothesis, one that would come to be known as the Beringian standstill model. It posited that a single major wave of people entered Beringia from Asia and remained there, not for years or even decades, but for thousands of years. During this prolonged isolation, cut off from their Asian ancestors by distance, by brutal climate, by massive ice sheets 2 miles thick that blocked all southern passage, the Beringian population differentiated genetically. New mutations arose and spread through the isolated community. Genetic drift created variation. The 5 haplogroups didn't represent 5 separate migrations from Asia. They represented genetic diversity that evolved within Beringia itself, in a population trapped between 2 worlds. The Upward Sun River infants provided the first direct evidence for this model. Both C1b and B2 are common in Native American populations scattered across 2 continents, yet they are completely non-existent in Asia, even in Siberia, where the ancestors of Native Americans originated. This strongly suggested these genetic markers arose after the ancestral population had entered Beringia. Using molecular clock techniques, a method that estimates the age of genetic lineages by measuring how quickly mutations accumulate over time. Like grains of sand in an hourglass, the team estimated that C1b arose approximately 12,800 years ago, and B2 around 12,000 years ago. After entry into Beringia, but before expansion into the Americas, the infants were living proof that genetic diversity existed in Beringia before the Great Migration southward began. But then came the even more remarkable discovery when an international team led by geneticist S.K. Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen sequenced USR1's complete nuclear genome, all of her DNA, not just the mitochondrial material. The results left researchers stunned. USR1 was genetically different from all other Native Americans, both ancient and modern. Her DNA showed that she belonged to a unique ancient population that scientists had never known existed. They named this ghost population the ancient Beringians. While USR1 carried this ancient Beringian lineage, USR2 belonged to a lineage ancestral to all other Native Americans. These 2 babies, buried together with such care, represented 2 separate branches of the human family tree, branches that had split apart 20,000 years ago, 20,000 years of separation. Yet here they lay, side by side. Through sophisticated demographic modeling, researchers pieced together a timeline that spanned continents and millennia. About 36,000 years ago, a population began separating from East Asians, though genetic exchanges continued until approximately 25,000 years ago, suggesting that by then, they had crossed into Beringia but maintained some contact with their Asian relatives. Around 25,000 to 20,000 years ago, something profound happened. The Beringian population mixed with another group called Ancient North Eurasians, people more closely related to modern Europeans than to Asians. This mixing created the ancestral Native American population, the foundation of all indigenous peoples in the Americas. Then, around 20,000 years ago, the population split. One branch became the ancient Beringians, represented by little sunrise child girl. They remained in Alaska for thousands of years, adapting to conditions so harsh they defy imagination. Temperatures far below 0, endless winter darkness, a landscape dominated by mammoths and giant bears. The ancient Beringians survived here for at least 8,500 years without significant mixing with other populations, their genetic signature remaining pure and distinct. Meanwhile, the other branch, the ancestors of USR2 and all other Native Americans, eventually found roots south as the ice sheets began to melt and retreat. But what happened to the ancient Beringians? Genetic evidence suggests that after 11,500 years ago, right around the time Sunrise Child Girl died, people carrying northern Native American ancestry moved northward back into Alaska in a reverse migration. This back migration may have replaced or absorbed the ancient Beringian population. Their distinct genetic signature disappeared from the record like smoke dissipating in the wind, even as elements of their material culture, their tools, their techniques, their knowledge, persisted in later archaeological sites. The ancient Beringians had survived for nearly 10,000 years in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Then they vanished. Yet, even as these genetic revelations support the Beringian standstill model, new archaeological evidence complicates our understanding of how people actually entered the Americas. The ice-free corridor between the massive Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets, once thought to be the main highway south, did not become biologically viable, capable of supporting human life, until about 13,800 years ago. But humans had already reached sites in southern South America by at least 14,600 years ago. The math doesn't work. The corridor was closed when people needed to use it. This strengthens an alternative theory, the Kelp Highway hypothesis, which suggests maritime peoples traveled down the Pacific coast in boats, using rich marine resources, fish, seals, shellfish, to sustain themselves. However, much of this ancient coastline is now submerged beneath hundreds of feet of seawater, making it nearly impossible to study. The evidence lies drowned beneath the waves. The simple schoolyard theory of Beringia as just a land bridge that people walked across has been revealed as far too simplistic. Beringia was not merely a highway connecting two continents. It was a home, a refuge, a crucible in which Native American genetic identity was forged over thousands of years of isolation. It was a place where children were born, where they died, where grieving parents buried them with red ochre and precious weapons, where entire populations lived and adapted and eventually disappeared. The Upward Sun River infants sit at the center of these profound debates. They are the most important human fossils from Beringia, a region absolutely vital to human prehistory, yet yielding extraordinarily few ancient skeletons because most of the land is now submerged beneath the Bering Sea, covered by glaciers, or composed of acidic soil that destroys organic material. Ben Potter, the University of Alaska archaeologist who discovered the remains, emphasized their unique importance. There are limited ancient human remains in the Americas, and only very few have undergone genomic analysis. This represents the first genetic data from the last ice age in Beringia. These infants are virtually the only remains from this critical period with high-quality genetic data. Without them, we would still be guessing about ancient Beringian populations, about the timing of the split between different Native American groups, about whether people waited in Beringia or passed through quickly. Without these two tiny girls, who never lived to see their first year, we would know almost nothing about a population that survived for 10,000 years. As research continues, new discoveries and improved analytical techniques will refine this picture. Each additional study, each new ancient DNA sample, each better computer model may reveal clearer timelines, more precise migration routes, and deeper understanding of population relationships. The story of the first peopling of the Americas will continue to evolve and, more importantly, improve. But the mystery lingers. What tragedy befell that ancient camp 11,500 years ago that 3 children died in such quick succession? Why was one cremated while 2 were buried? Were they victims of disease, of accident, of the brutal environment? We will probably never know the full story of that heartbreak. What we do know is this: Sunrise Child Girl and Dawn, Twilight Child Girl, who lived and died before recorded history began, have given us something precious. They have given us a window into our own origins, into the courage and resilience of the people who first came to this hemisphere. They remind us that behind every scientific discovery, behind every genetic haplogroup and demographic model, there were real people who loved their children enough to bury them with the finest possessions they had. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, consider giving it a like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts or questions.